Hi, my name is Suzanne Delaney of the Irish Inquiry, and today I want to talk to you about ABB House, a massive new proposed iPass centre on the Belgard Road in Tallaght, Dublin 24. And as you can see from the picture, it's anything but a house, and it can hold up to 1,500 migrants. South Dublin County Council originally designated this to be turned into 344 apartments, and they have since forgotten that there's a housing crisis and we need those apartments for homeless people, and have decided it's going to become an iPass centre instead. So I looked into ABB House since yesterday and all the planning applications, etc., and I found out some very interesting things, and I wanted to share with you those interesting things. But first to say, Tallaght is plagued with migrant centres. Their hotels are full of migrants, and every morning 2 busloads of men with some women get dropped off in Jobestown, presumably from Crooksling. And some of them go off, but some of them stay in the area. They drink, do drugs, and there are allegations of a couple of them filming children in the park there. So the only people that all these migrant centres benefit is the government, who are carrying out agendas, and greedy landlord owners, iPass owners, who I prefer to call white collar human traffickers, and they commodify human beings and store them en masse in warehouse-like settings such as this ABB house. And it's an institutionalised setting, and that's not good for anybody to live in, particularly children, and they call it humanitarian duty. All it does is destroy communities, and it doesn't really do anything in the long run for the people in those places either. So the locals are having a protest there today in outside ABB House in Tallaght, Dublin 24 on the Belgard Road. It's the 8th of May at 6 o'clock, and they would really appreciate your support. So I'm going to now tell you what I know about ABB House. So the very first thing I did before I went about finding out who owns ABB House and those details that are important was I submitted the square footage of ABB House, which is 41,000 square feet, to AI, and I asked AI to account for the communal areas and give me a number of people who will be staying in this building, and it estimated between 1,000 and 1,500. So then I set about looking for the owners and any planning applications submitted to South Dublin County Council. If you don't mind, I might have to just glance at my notes here because I've only just put this information together. I used an interactive map on the South Dublin County Council website to look for the information I needed. And I tell you that because then you'll be able to go and do the same in your area on your council's, local council's website. So I found the company name, which is Cuspview, and that gave me a starting point to look for the owners, their registered address, and so on. But before I actually went on the website, I did try locating the receiver who dealt with the sale of this building, as it changed hands recently. And coincidentally, the receiver is a man called Miles Kirby of Kirby Healy Chartered Accountants. And he is the same Miles Kirby who was appointed by a High Court judge as a receiver in the case of Enoch Burke. In other words, he was the one who was to ensure the state cleared Mr. Burke's bank account of his personal funds of almost 80,000. And for anyone living under a rock, Mr. Burke is a Christian teacher who refused to use transgender preferred pronouns at school. He subsequently protested at said school and spent over 400 days in jail. I called Kirby's business to find out who bought ABB House, but they were not forthcoming. So I discovered on the South Dublin County Council website that ABB House was sold for 5.2 million to a company called Cuspview, and that was only set up 7 months ago in September 2024, and they already have this government contract. A few weeks later, in November 2024, a higher executive officer from the Department of Children Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, which still had Roderick O'Gorman as a minister at the time, expressed to South Dublin County Council on behalf of the department that they wished to use ABB House as a migrant centre, and here is the letter. Just 2 months after that, on January 13th, 2025, a South Dublin County Council senior planner wrote back to the planning consultancy firm HW Planning, which is situated in Cork, acknowledging an application for planning exemptions for ABB House. This HW Planning handle public and private sector planning applications, and their director is Harry Walsh, and he has previously signed a notice regarding retention of the Great Southern Hotel in Rosslare, which has been designated for use as a migrant centre. Rosslare is another town that has been utterly destroyed beyond all recognition. Just to note the price of ABB House, as I said, they spent 5.25 million, and they'll probably spend 1 or 2 million on conversion, but they'll likely recoup these millions with the taxpayer funds they'll be paid in a 3-month period for a building of this size. And I base this on what I know of similar sized migrant centres. So anyway, HW Planning wrote looking for the planning exemption on January 10th, 2025, and by February 5th, 2025, the council grant an exemption on all planning constraints, and this presumably includes fire cert planning, as a lot of these centres do not have full fire certs and they only kit out the building for fire safety retrospectively, in other words, after the people have entered the building and start living there. And this happened in East Wall ESB Centre, owned by Mel Sutcliffe's company Goldstein. So this is the situation. You have councils knocking on people's doors, wanting to inspect garages they might have converted for their adult child that can't leave home because they can't afford a house. But a 41,000 square foot building that could hold 1,500 human beings is not subject to planning constraints. It just beggars belief. Now, before we look at the owners of Custview and ABB House, here's a quick look at the floor plans for ABB House, and you can pause if you need to, but I haven't examined them too much as they're downplaying the amount of people who will be crammed in, depicting 1 of 3 floors, or 4 if you include the basement, will be used to house migrants. And I don't believe that. As I say, these humans they're a cost to the taxpayer, but each one is a commodified product to Custview. Now, I went onto solocheck.ie and I paid a few quid to discover who the owners of Custview are and what company structure it has, which is important too. 58-year-old Fionnuala Gilmartin is the director, and 74-year-old Brendan Delaney is the chartered secretary, and they have a number of other companies as well. Their partial addresses are on solocheck.ie if anyone wants to see those, but I won't be posting those here. Custview is registered as a business at Liffey Lodge, Lucan, which is not to be confused with Liffey Lodge in Newbridge, which houses Ukrainians and is owned by Kildare County Council. I asked Stephen to call the phone numbers associated with Gilmartin and Delaney, but when the calls were answered, the people at the other end acted genuinely surprised and said he had the wrong number. I can't put up pictures of either person as none exist, and that I can reliably say are them, and I think that's deliberate because they're in the greed game here, and as with these kinds of unscrupulous people are destroying communities while referring to the mass warehousing of humans as you know, they're doing a good thing, and they know that the public are not happy, so they don't want their pictures out there. I did find a business consultant, Fionnuala Gilmartin, with Lucan connections, who has worked in South Dublin County Council in the past, plus has been involved with serving on several state department boards and in procuring EU grants. And given that Custview says it offers business consultancy services and is registered in Lucan to a Fionnuala Gilmartin, I am of the opinion they are the same person. As for Custview, it is a limited company, meaning they can undertake any activity and the owners have no personal liability if the company goes into debt, and their books are also not public. So the owners of this company have no real risk involved here and do not have to be transparent about how they spend taxpayer money. That makes it easier for a company like this to obscure financial reality by using complex accounting structures and other tricks, which mean oversight is not easily achieved. In other words, cooking the books is more possible. And when you're dealing with millions in taxpayers' money, that's really not acceptable. So for now anyway, that's all I have to report on this. It's possible to find out some things with these setups, but not everything, as I will demonstrate in another video soon about migrant super landlord Mel Sutcliffe and the Central Bank of Ireland, who are covering up some things. So thanks for watching, and please try to make it to the protest today if you can. It's 6 p.m. on the Belgard Road outside ABB House in Tallaght.